To say that an HK G11 isn't something you see every day, that would be the understatement of 2024. It is by most accounts the most ambitious HK project ever. One look at the HK G11 and you might imagine it was designed for Han Solo to use against the Death Star, when in reality it was on its way to becoming the gun of the US military. In the 1970s and 80s, the military was looking for a replacement for the M16. Their primary objective was to come up with a weapon that would increase the hit probability of the average shooter while firing on burst. This pursuit leads to the ACR program, or Advanced Combat Rifle, and emerging from this program was the most bold HK gun of all time, the G11. The G11 was designed to fire a lightweight 4.7mm caseless ammunition. A soldier with an M16 and 240 rounds of 5.56 could, for the same weight, carry a G11 with 550 rounds. To put the craziness of the G11 in perspective, a minigun, which has 6 barrels and a motor to operate it, on a low setting shoots at 2,000 rounds per minute. The G11, on its hyperfire mode, aka 3-round burst, also shoots at 2,000 rounds per minute. It was so fast that 3 rounds would leave the muzzle before the recoil would even reach the shooter. So the question is, an engineering marvel like the G11, why did it never come to fruition? I will open with this. I asked you the other day, I was like, James, let's just say that there's no loss and you can take anything you want from the gray room. What would be the single solitary thing that you would take? And you said what? That's it. That's it. Because there's just none outside of here. Yeah. Like, I mean, they don't exist. They are not ownable. So,
not in private hands. No.
So today we are talking about the G11. I think, as we'll discuss today, probably a highly misunderstood gun and program, because it looks like that was designed to do battle in outer space, but in many ways it was actually way more practical than that, and it's pretty fascinating stuff, actually. So we're going to get all into the G11, its origins, really show you guys how these worked, what they're intended to do, and what I think will be really cool for you guys to see is you think of this as a thing that either never came to be or never really worked or whatever. And it's like, we're going to actually show you a public demonstration that was put on of the G11 firing. And I mean, it's really cool. When I came across the footage, I was like, that is fascinating, and we need to show that. So we're going to show everyone that and just kind of walk you through what's happening as this thing fires on hyperfire and all kinds of cool stuff. But none of that matters without the man, the myth, the legend, James Williamson, who's here to make me and Chris, make our jobs easy today, really. Yeah. Because you got to do all the work today.
I'm, again, just incredibly humbled not to be here with my friends once again, but to be here in the gray room representing H&K on this project. And this is fun because there have been a few videos out there that have been more of a, tabletop discussion on the operation of the weapon, but I've never really seen the complete story to be told. And the video that we're going to have here kind of does what we can't do, or what those other videos haven't been able to do, which is showcase the weapon being firing. Because we can talk about hyperburst fire and how it delayed the recoil impulse, but until you see it,
yeah,
you don't really
cool.
have an appreciation for what this was.
It's really cool. Are any of the current volumes of the book talking about the G11?
Yeah, in fact, by the time this video releases, we'll have volume 3 out there on the streets, and we'll already be working on volume 4. Volume 4 starts with the G11.
Oh,
so that's
okay, spicy.
It's going to be a special one that, of course, you got to get the 4-volume set, but I think the real fans are going to be excited to see what we were able to provide in that, not just because of the access here in H&K's gray room, but because the access we got going to Germany is pretty neat.
Awesome. Yep. All right, before we get into the origin story, a couple quick thank yous. Guys, a quick thank you, and really maybe more of a question. Would it be a legally justified shooting to if your life is threatened and you smoked someone with 3 rounds on hyperburst from a G11, is that a legally justified shooting? I don't actually know the answer to it. But let's say that it was. In that case, FLP, Firearms Legal Protection, would cover that, and that would be the most awesome way to defend your life ever. Just throwing it out there. If anyone wants to send us some ammo or anything. So anyway, they've got a few different plans. Basically, self-defense insurance covers you in all the different states. Well, there's a plan that covers you in all the states, so that if you travel, you can get that plan, or if you got family, you can cover them with a different plan. So uncapped attorney fees covers all legal weapons, which again, I think we should at least consider having this in the list of things that they cover here. Bail bond premiums, they cover expert witness fees. These are all the things we don't talk about a lot, but things that actually matter if you wind up in a court having to defend yourself. So there's a code. It's 1911. Should be real simple. Plug in that code. That saves you guys a bunch of money off of the different plans. It's something that we've got to keep the little card thing in my wallet there for the day that hopefully never comes. So plug in that code. Saves you guys a bunch of money. Appreciate the support. On with the show. Okay, so let's start getting into this. I feel like the origin story of the G11 actually begins way earlier than most people think it does.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people think it's this product of the 1980s, but really the story dates all the way back to right after the adoption of the G3 for the German Armed Forces. That selection of 7.62 becoming the new NATO cartridge presented some challenges from a battle rifle standpoint. We all have experience with those. Really accurate rifles in that caliber, but pretty hard to control sustained rapid fire with a cartridge that much because of the recoil impulse from it. So the German Armed Forces were smart enough to look at historical perspectives and a lot of things they had experienced coming out of World War II. And what they realized was having a cartridge like that really kind of dates back to World War I and before, the likelihood of the engagements they were seeing coming out of those combat environments were not these 600 and 800 yard shots. They were well within 300 yards. And what they were also able to find was that the enemy that you were trying to engage was going to not expose themselves for extended periods of time. It was going to be very brief windows of opportunity that you had to be able to shoot at them. So we had to have something that we could fire quickly, but they also understood that the more rounds that you could fire accurately in a short period of time, the more likely you were going to be able to incapacitate that threat. Using a full power 7.62 cartridge and trying to fire that in a burst or full auto mode is really uncontrollable. Not really going to do that. So they quickly decided that what they were interested in was a future combat weapon and ammunition. They realized they had to have the two things together, and that started a program of development really around 1968 for H&K to build the weapon, for Dynamite Nobel to create the ammunition, and in this case, caseless ammunition, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and Hensoldt to do the optic, which again, an integrated optic at that time period was unheard of. So, so really interesting to put all those things together. And the key to this, obviously, is the caseless ammunition. You can go to any gun store, pick up a box of 7.62 ammo, and you can immediately say, wow, there's some heft to that.
Yeah.
The majority of the weight in any of your standard type ammunition is in the casing itself. If we can eliminate that casing and what it's doing, holding the bullet and the powder and the primer all together, we reduce significantly the overall weight of that and the cost. A lot of the cost in that is in the casing itself. So with caseless ammunition, what they've done is they've taken that propellant and they've hardened it. They've solidified it, they've waterproofed it, and then in the back end you put a primer, in the front end you put a bullet, and now you can make things smaller, you can make them lighter, and that was what they were looking to do with the ammunition. What they were looking to do with that accuracy and able to deliver a higher volume of fire, they created what we generally refer to as hyperburst.
Yeah.
So we're familiar with,
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
that
what I'm
sound good?
saying.
Yeah, great name.
We're familiar with burst fire. We've seen it. The U.S. Army was very interested in this as well. They had several programs, the SPEW program and the Salvo program, looking at the same kind of things that the German military was looking at. And we can remember the M16A2 being presented with a 3-round burst function. Same kind of concept. With hyperburst fire, and what they did with the G11 was to be able to create a system that allows all 3 rounds to be fired before the recoil impulse hits the shooter. So the barrel is stabilized, it's going to be on target. We'll talk about that more in the functional breakdown. But that's the concept. It took a little while to get this off the ground because the only funding was coming from the German government. And it took a while, not just for H&K to initially develop the weapon, but for Dynamite Nobel to develop the ammunition. And we saw several, more than a few caliber changes as they tried to figure out what they were going to actually use and to kind of figure out how we're going to do this caseless piece.
And we even saw that on the variants that we have here.
We do.
Yeah, one's in
a different,
4.73 and what's the other
this
one?
is 473.
That's 473 in the final version. This version, which was just a couple years earlier, was 4.92. But there's many more iterations from those 60s on developments.
Yeah, I think there's 5 or 6 caliber changes total.
Yep. And so that started again in the late 60s. And was still kind of trying to get everything right when in the late 1970s, NATO comes out and says, hey, we're going to come up with this new cartridge. We're going to move away from a standard 7.62 NATO cartridge. We want an intermediate round. Germany and H&K wanted to submit the G11 in the caseless ammunition, but it was not ready for prime time at that point. And because they weren't able to submit it, wasn't able to compete, and obviously we all know 5.56 was the new NATO cartridge. And at that point, the German government had decided not to fund the program anymore because that's what everybody was going to, and the program stalled until 1982 when the U.S. Army, again taking these earlier programs focused on the same kind of thing, delivering a high volume of fire very accurately in a short amount of time, released the ACR, or Advanced Combat Rifle Program, and that sparked new interest in it. And it got funding from the U.S. military, and that would also lead to 1984, the German military realizing that, hey, we haven't transitioned to a 5.56 cartridge like everybody else in Europe has. We want to jump ahead. Instead of doing that, we want to look back at this caseless ammunition weapon that we were working with before, see how that works. We see the U.S. Army's interest, and they began, again, funding the development. And that's what carries us into the 1980s to these two versions that we have here. Where that really picks up again with success is in 1988. The German Armed Forces receive their first prototypes, and they go to the schoolhouses for airborne, long-range reconnaissance and mountaineering. We got some great pictures here from the mountain troops testing those that we'll roll in here for some footage for you guys. And the weapons performed incredibly well. Following that, about the same time, 1989, the U.S. Army receives these first at Aberdeen Proving Grounds for testing and development. And then in 1990, they go end of 89, beginning 1990, they go down to Fort Benning, right outside the gates here. And I
didn't know that was here.
Yeah. The Army ACR program testing. And that's where I think a lot of people here in the U.S. saw it, because there were a lot of articles in the publications at the time. Very interesting. At the 4 different companies were competing for that contract at that period. You had Steyr and a company called AAI that had both presented one as an ACR, but there was no requirement in there for a specific ammunition type. So the Steyr and the AAI submissions used a flechette type round. Colt submitted a weapon that looks very much like an M16, but it used what they called a duplex round.
What's a flechette round, first of all?
Yeah, so a flechette is basically like a bunch of steel darts that are all put inside one casing and will go out.
hell yes.
So instead of
Like medieval
instead of
Can I
firing
get some
3
of that?
individual rounds, you fire one round, kind of like a shotgun.
Oh, a
shell,
shotgun, yeah.
but with darts. And then the Colt one was a duplex round, where you had, it looks like a standard bullet, like a standard 7.62 cartridge, but it's actually one bullet that you can see, and right behind it in the casing is another bullet behind the propellant. So their idea was, well, 2 bullets are going to come out at the same time.
That's
and
interesting.
We'll increase the likelihood of that. And then obviously H&K submits this. They provided 15 rifles. Each rifle went through 4,000 rounds without any major malfunctions and stoppages, and was received incredibly well. And the video that you guys will show later is a follow-on to that, where they did a larger demonstration in front of a larger audience, including all the big decision makers, to showcase the functionality of that. Following that, in 1990, the German government provided the approval for the G11 to be adopted for military service, and a contract for orders was placed for an initial 300,000 for the German Armed Forces, with a follow-on 224,000 that would be produced all the way through 2003. And obviously H&K expected that would be the first of many orders for it. We'll talk about what happened here kind of at the end of closing comments, but as far as being a successful weapon, it definitely was, both in the eyes of the ACR program, test and development they had done up to that point, and for the German Armed Forces in their decision to adopt it as their new weapon.
Okay, killer. So, no pun intended, killer there. But that said, let's transition a little bit. We'll talk about sort of practical application features and how these bad boys work. Okay, let's start talking about some G11s. Amongst the most fascinating guns ever. I mean, in essence, if you look at the core of it, you basically got a bullpup.
Yeah, kind of.
Ish.
Except, normally in a bullpup, you think the magazine also is behind the trigger, even though the action in this case is. But obviously on this one, the magazine's on the top, which is definitely unusual.
Yeah, it's a hybrid of all kinds of interesting things going on here. So where do we begin?
So we'll roll in a shot here of me holding a series of photos of all of the different kind of development phases of the G11. We don't have those earlier models here inside the gray room to showcase in person. Initially, they weren't polymer. They were using metal as they were on a lot of the other ones.
Oh my God, that must have been heavy.
Yeah, but as the development went on, obviously, we're getting into the element where H&K is really getting proficient with using revolutionary space-age polymer construction, and obviously that lightens the weapons up a bit. So the example you see here in front of me is the ACR trials example model, kind of going over, the look here. You can see, a traditional kind of trigger group, look for H&K, much like what you'd see on the G3 or the MP5. The selectors are very much the same. You can see there's a handguard kind of barrel shroud that sits over the free-floating barrel beneath it. You can see a 50-round magazine that's loaded on the top with the ammunition facing down. And then you can see an integrated optic up here. Initially, you had a 1-power optic. They also offered a 3.5 magnification optic as well.
So, I mean, if, it's fascinating because on the magazine, they've got the little, I guess we'll call it round, if you will.
Grunt proof.
In terms of like, hey, basically bullet point down is what that says.
It does. It obviously gives them the orientation, but because of the locking position, it won't load in in the other direction.
it.
So even if you weren't paying attention to that or it was dark, you can only load it into the weapon.
Well, and then maybe that's a good time to kind of talk a little bit about the round.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, when I first heard caseless ammunition, I was like, I don't understand what it is that we're talking about. Now I kind of understand just through research, but maybe I'll pass that kind of.
Yeah,
try to explain this.
We'll roll in a closer shot for you guys, but this shows the cartridge itself. This is the 4.92 cartridge, so it's not the final version of 4.7, but this is what they're using for ACR, and you'll see here at the top, that's the completed cartridge, and then below it, you can see it broken down. So you've got the primer, the propellant or the casing in the caseless ammunition itself, your booster, your projectile, and then a little plastic cap at the end. So when the weapon was fired, obviously the primer detonates it, and the propellant or the caseless portion of it will cause the rest of it to go out. So your actual primer and your projectile will both go out the barrel.
And so there's really nothing left.
There's nothing left. So that's one of the neat things we'll talk about in the function. It eliminates the need in the 8-step cycle of operation for extraction and ejection. That's how you can get it to fire faster than you would another weapon.
So, and I mean, you notice in a traditional sense, there's no ejection port here.
There is an ejection port.
There is,
we'll
but
get
in
to
a
that.
non-traditional sort of way.
But in truly just an administrative function
Yeah.
of the need to clear the weapon after I've loaded it and I'm done firing. You can actuate that, and we'll showcase that here as well.
Cool.
The rest of your functionality here at the rear is just a rear end cover of the weapon. If we look at the selector here, you'll notice that they have positions for safe, single fire, 3-round burst, and 50 round. Obviously 50 round is just a full auto setting. Ideally, the weapon is best suited in 3-round burst. If you need to take a single shot, you can, but the weapon is optimized to perform in that 3-round hyper burst fire.
And can we talk a little bit about, I think it's very interesting, the cyclic rate in terms of, because the hyper fire mode and the full auto mode are very different.
Drastically different.
Vastly
Very different.
So usually if you have a gun that's got a 3-round burst functionality, it will have a slower rate of fire than you would if you had it in fully automatic. In this case, in 3-round burst function, you had 2,000 round per minute capability. You put in full auto, you're only down to about 600, 650.
Yep.
So it's significantly different, but that's relative to the way the system operates and how the recoil impulse hits it. So that's why putting it in 3-round burst function is more ideal.
And I mentioned this in the intro, but it's like 2,000 rounds per minute is at the slow end of where a minigun fires. You think about that.
Yeah.
A gun powered by a motor
That has 6 barrels.
that's stationary, right? You're not holding a minigun. This is a shoulder fire weapon that will shoot 3 rounds standing up at the pace of a fucking minigun here.
Yeah.
Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. Well,
like, this is nuts.
And it's one that we'll show in the video here that I think the fans
It's cool.
really appreciate.
It's really cool.
So that's the original version. If we take the one that you have there, this is the K2. This is the final version that was presented after the ACR trials, after the German military had talked about it. And the changes you really see on this, one thing is the magazines. You saw how long that magazine was.
Sure.
That's obviously going to be kind of a challenge for somebody to carry in magazine pouches.
Right.
And so there was a request to be able to figure out an ammo storage capability. H&K just decided to redesign the forward handguard to create the ability to now onboard stow 2 additional mags, one on either side of the one that's loaded. They also reduced the capacity of the magazines from 45 rounds. I'm sorry, from 50 rounds down to 45. That's why you see the selector marking down here is 45. And they created stripper clips of 15 rounds each. So to reload these things, you'd pull out your 15-round stripper clip and load in 15,
so cool.
load in another 15, load another 15, and now you can reload that. So onboard stowage, instead of just having 45 rounds on the gun, well, now you can
35 rounds.
Yeah, that's a lot of obviously ammo on board the gun.
Well, and a thing I wrote down, because I think it's very fascinating, right? Because if you go, so to put it in perspective, right, a G3 with 100 rounds weighs 16 pounds.
Yeah.
I know you already know this, but an M16, right, at 16 pounds is 240 rounds, right? Now, if we go, okay, we want to maintain the same weight for combat loadout, but we're going to run the G11 with the caseless ammo, it's 550 rounds.
Yeah.
So you go, I mean, literally, you more than double your M16. That is crazy. And I mean, like you said, damn near 150 rounds is on the gun.
Yeah.
That's
definitely
wild.
Increase the combat potential of the individual operator to be able to have that much ammunition on board without having to resupply.
Yeah.
Was pretty crucial. The other
Just carrying all the extra ammo in pouches and bags and everything. I mean, you can just be far more capable.
Yep, and then because of the stripper clip system of those 15 round settings, you didn't have to have 8 more of these magazines somewhere on the system. You'll see it's really quick to reload. The other thing they incorporated here, Chris, what do you see here on the bottom?
Yeah, so they did a couple other things. They incorporated a spot so you can throw a laser on there, which is pretty cool. That's removable. This is also the same spot your bayonet would go.
Yep.
And then also on this version, they integrated your sling mounts on either side, which is pretty cool.
Yep, they do.
So.
And we'll roll in
One thing while we're on the mags too, if we can, I don't know how we can show it on camera, but just German engineering. They also put a dust cover where your magazine slot is.
Yes.
I don't know if you know this.
I haven't seen this.
We'll roll in a close-up here for you guys, but if you take the magazine out of this weapon, and if you look here in the front,
there is a door here that is spring-loaded.
Pointed at that guy right there?
That is spring-loaded.
Whoa.
Let me get a pen, see if I can. So they thought of everything, but it's a spring-loaded internal dust cover, so when you remove the mag, no rocks, dirt, and debris can get down in there.
Dang.
Which is just cool.
That is cool.
I don't know, it's just really, really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man.
So that's the overall, kind of look of the external features on the weapon. As you might have noticed, this is your magazine release button.
Yeah.
So the magazine that's loaded in the weapon, you push here. You'll see these tabs. There's one here on one side, one here on the other side. You just push those in. It'll slide off the handguard. There's another tab on the back. In the bottom, you could slide off the rear. But as you're about to find out inside, this is the other thing that I think is really neat, is this is an incredibly overly complex design.
That's insane.
Like way out of the box thinking on this thing. As far as the amount of individual parts that are on there.
Which I just got to bring up real quick. I didn't count them all, but going over individual parts, in the original manual, which we have here, which is very cool, there's 13 pages of parts that complete the system.
Yeah.
So I jokingly said, 50 parts? And you're like, well, kind of. And then we were going through this. It's 13 pages of parts, which is just interesting. So.
Can I ask you a question because related to the parts thing? So this essentially recreation of the, what would we call it? The mechanism,
Operating
the fire
system.
operating
the
system.
barrel and operating system.
Is minus obviously the barrel not being a real barrel, is this actually, my question is is what this weighs, what it probably actually weighs in there? Because this is incredibly dense.
Yes.
And the other thing, and you'll be able to see this on camera as you look at some of the B-roll footage, I mean, it is perfect. There are no machining marks.
It's insane.
It didn't need to be as clean.
Like the fit and finish work is what you're talking
absolutely perfect. It's Swiss watch quality.
Yeah,
that you don't
it's
need
nuts.
for a military grade. The mil spec grade, that is not mil spec.
No. But I mean, this is just like
incredible.
a solid chunk of heavy metal. I mean, it's like, dear
But
Lord,
feels very balanced in the
you,
weapon system.
But when you remove all these other components,
Yeah.
you realize how light the rest of the weapon is otherwise.
Oh yeah, It's like all the weight is right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
But this is a gas piston operating system.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But my point of what I was trying to talk about with all these parts, and obviously you look at that, you say, wow, that's overly complex engineered. From an operator level, this is incredibly simplistic.
Simple, yeah.
So what do we see here on the bottom of the pistol grip there?
Yeah, this also, if I can, I don't have fingernails, but there we go. So your cleaning kit is stored in the bottom of the pistol grip, which this is literally it. You open the ejection port in the bottom, stick this in the hole, rub it around a couple times, pull it out. So, and that is the operating terminology.
And then
how
within
anatomy
there as
works.
well, you've got to pull through
Bore
barrel
snake.
bore
It goes
snake
through the
barrel.
grip.
Yeah,
No,
well,
it's
it's
stored
in
inside the grip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you remove that, you can clean the barrel. That's it. That's all the maintenance that you had to do at an operator level in order to maintain the weapon,
Yeah, that's
because it's
wild.
caseless,
Yeah,
and it's a
right.
piston-driven system, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Right.
And this wasn't until later. Because like the first iteration, I believe didn't have this, the G11.
The early ones did
Yeah.
not, but when they went to say, okay, well, how are we going to issue this to individual troops?
To be able to
Yeah.
clean in the field. Yeah, so this was almost an afterthought, which is interesting.
But I think there's also this kind of misconception that like there's no way that you could issue this to an average soldier. He wouldn't be able to maintain it. Look how complex it is. You don't have to take all
Right.
these other
Yeah.
components apart for normal maintenance on the weapon because of how clean the operating system was. So that was pretty neat. On this side of the weapon, you'll see this little tab here and this rotating dial. This is what you would use as a charging handle. So you wind it like you do a clock. You turn it forward and it rotates to cock the weapon, and you do one full 360-degree turn to now cock it. And as we mentioned before, for administrative needs, if I needed to unload
Yeah.
the round that's in there, if you look here at the bottom, there's an ejection port down here. As I turn it, you will notice that the ejection port will open, and you'll be able to see inside there. And at that point, it would kick out the
Yeah.
casing or the caseless ammunition cartridge in there, and then you'd rotate, and it would close off again and recock the weapon.
God, it's
Just cool.
Yeah.
Just cool.
Yep.
yeah, it's just wild.
Which it's
man.
right next to your face too, so you'd probably go, almost muzzle high, right?
Yep.
Wind it, drop out the cartridge, and then, well, not cartridge, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. We haven't figured out what the right terminology is to say
Be
it.
a caseless round,
Yeah,
technically,
caseless
because
round.
cartridge isn't correct.
The remains. I don't.
Well, no, because there are no remains. That would be if there's some way you need to clear the gun.
Yeah.
It'd drop a live round
Right.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah.
See, you're even confused. You don't even know.
No. It's like I get it. It's almost like truthfully, I'm in full like just kind of nerd fan
Yeah,
mode right
yeah,
now.
that's cool.
It's like as a fan of all this stuff, like this is just a good time right now. Like I feel like I'm on vacation, but technically I'm working right now. This is just cool.
Yep. So now we'll look at the actual barrel and action assembly here on this, because this is really obviously the heart of the system and what I think is really, really impressive. Obviously, you see the barrel that's in the center, and then on either side, you'll see a tube here and a tube here that are mounted together. On the left side of the barrel assembly in this tube is your recoil spring assembly. On the right side is your gas piston system.
Okay.
So it is a gas-operated gun using a piston-driven system. If you look here on the left side, you're going to see this disc here on the top. This is what actuates against the charging handle that we just rotated. If we remove this disc behind there, there is a breech cylinder. And the magazine would be mounted right here on the top with the rounds facing down. In its open state, the breech cylinder is facing vertically up to the top, which allows the round to feed down into it. When I rotate that charging handle, it turns it 90 degrees and aligns the breech cylinder with the barrel, so now it's ready to go. When you fire the round, some of the gas behind the actual bullets going down the barrel is diverted into the gas cylinder. The gas piston drives this lever, which then turns these two gears, which will then rotate the breech cylinder back to the vertical position, drop the next round in, and rotate it back horizontal again for the follow-on shots. The barrel and action assembly all go back to the rear at the same time. So it's not something where the barrel stays in place and you've got a bolt that goes back to the rear like we do in a normal AR-15 style weapon. The entire assembly goes back to the rear. When you have it set on semi-automatic, it only goes back to the rear about 2 inches. If you put it on burst fire, it's going to go back about 4.5 inches for the next shot and then all the way back to the rear of the third shot. What that does is mean that the felt recoil in 3-round burst does not hit the shooter until all 3 rounds have left the barrel.
Right.
And then it resets itself again. The counting wheel on this resets, and now you're ready for the next trigger pull.
Look, I'm just going to say this. That's how I would have designed it too.
Yeah,
Okay.
clearly. Right?
Like if they put me in charge, I'd be like, guys, we're gonna do it like this, and I would have came up with that.
I think on the hyperburst fire, that was the most fascinating thing, is that by the time the third round has left the barrel, you still haven't even technically felt the recoil.
Yep.
Right? Till about a split second after that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can get 3 rounds off with no recoil, which would improve your accuracy quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you'll see that obviously in the video
Big time.
that will showcase later the effect and how fast it's firing is pretty impressive. So
Yeah. Incredible. So are we ready for that?
Yeah,
Anything else we should talk about?
I think the last thing I'll showcase here, if we can get Chris to hold them up, just for the total H&K nerds, this is something that was really awesome. In the research for the Vickers Guide series, we were able to uncover these still in H&K's archives here. Jim Schatz, who was the program manager at the time for this weapon for H&K, he created all these for the ACR program. So you got the armorer's manual that told you how to take the thing completely apart, maintain it. You've got the program.
This also says real quick, sorry, first draft.
First draft.
Sorry, I just saw that. So
Yep. You've got this yellow book is the actual program of instruction for the ACR trials of everything that they were going to run the students through in order to run it. And then that last small book there, they even created a rifle range record book where they could call their shots for each one of the stages of fire. Really, really cool that these things are still exist, and a wealth of knowledge in these books if you want to learn about the weapon system. Unfortunately, this all predates everything being digital and
Right.
out on the internet.
It's like this is all there is right
Yeah,
here.
so you just can't find this out in some electronic document that exists out there.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yep.
Video time.
Yep.
Let's do that. Guys, that's HK G11 magazine. Big Tex Ordnance does not currently carry these, not in the roster. They also don't have replacement parts for a G11. So if you happen to have one in your grandpappy's closet or anything like that, they're not going to have a lot of support they can lend to that. Pretty much anything else they are going to have if you needed mags or optics or lasers or lights or just about anything you can think of. It's like Big Tech Superstore for tactical gear there. We recommend you check it out. They ship everything very quick. I've been a customer for years prior to them sponsoring the show. So a lot of fun for us to get to work with them. There's a code you guys can plug in that'll save you guys 10% off the entire store. It's 1911 SYN. Definitely use that. Helps us, helps you, helps them. Everyone wins, and those are my favorite deals. So check that out. Great company, based in Texas, family-run business. Really good people. Beyond that, 1911syndicate.com. If you guys need real estate help, if you're confused on what the hell I'm talking about, just go to 1911syndicate.com. We'll have some info on the website there. We've also got our Patreon linked below if you guys want behind the scenes access. Starting today, we've actually got about 20 people from Patreon coming to Columbus, Georgia. I kid you not, private gray room tour lined up and some other perks that they don't even know about at the time that we're filming this. I mean, they're gonna get treated like freaking VIPs around here. So a lot of cool stuff that happens on Patreon. Check that out. With that said, let's show you some testing footage of the G11. All right, everyone, let's get the party started. Thanks to HK Pro for letting us bum their video here. I messaged them. I was like, hey, I found this on your page, and it's like the coolest thing ever. Can we use it? And they were like, yeah, go for it. So thanks to those dudes. All right, here we go.
So just for reference, this is H&K actually filming this demonstration.
The next demonstration will be conducted by Heckler & Koch, and Mr. Brett Gunther from Heckler & Koch will tell you about what he's going to fire.
And this is in front of like what audience?
A large live studio audience of
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Like mostly military
I'd like to
personnel or
direct your
what?
attention
the
to
decision makers as well
your
as
left side of the range at the
other
very
industry
end.
professionals.
Heckler & Koch is pleased to present the first U.S. public demonstration of the new H&K G11 K2 rifle and its caseless ammunition. Volker Kurtz from Heckler & Koch GmbH, wearing the new German Army camouflage uniform, will demonstrate the unique safety aspects of the caseless ammunition developed by Diamond Nobel when exposed to open flame. immersed in water for 4 hours is going to be burned to demonstrate the resistance of the ammunition to the effects of moisture.
Which to me, this seems like this would have been a big. The water thing to me seems pretty.
There was a lot of question about,
Right.
you know, how are we going to be able to store and transport and maintain this ammo prior to loading into the weapon to shoot said bad guy. So they wanted to demonstrate that. What you saw before as they introduced him.
5-inch exploding target at 300 meters, and then 5 2-inch exploding targets at 100 meters in rapid succession.
What you saw there was the German employee demonstrating the ammunition dressed in German military uniform. This is Jim Schatz, the U.S. employee dressed in U.S. combat uniform. I thought was a great touch.
Good size little explosion there. Reload. The looks of it.
Volker will now reload a 45-round magazine with 3 15-round pre-packaged reloading units.
This is cool.
That's so cool.
Jim will now fire the G11 in 3-round burst mode at the concrete wall to your front, demonstrating the effectiveness of the 2,200 rounds
So this is
per minute
hyperfire.
rate of fire.
This is
Take
hyperfire,
note of the
but-
weapon's perfect operation even after being buried.
You'll notice they'd already put it out in the dirt
Yeah.
and just retrieved it from the ground. Of course, big ooh-ah from the crowd.
So that's 3 rounds at a
Jim will
time.
now fire
All
the
from
G11
standing
in
offhand.
various modes of
Very
fire
controllable.
at the white silhouette to the left to demonstrate the weapon's excellent controllability. The weapon will also be immersed in water prior to firing the weapon.
You can see the barrel reciprocating there too.
So he reloads it, shoves it in the ground with a bayonet on there. Again, all to show the toughness of the weapon. And now they've got a pre-staged water dunk area. And there's your full auto demonstration.
Yep. Such a different cyclic rate.
On the left, Jim will field strip the G11K2 to normal operator maintenance level and will reassemble the weapon, demonstrating the ease in which this can be accomplished. On the right, Volker is replacing the normal daylight sight with a Litton M845 Mark II night sight, demonstrating the versatility of the G11's detachable sight mounting system. Notice that no tools are required to assemble the weapon and how fingers are removed during field stripping.
What he's done here is he's taken the cylinder assembly out of the action, and now he's reassembling that, and then he'll put on the rear section again.
At H&K, we think we have the perfect solution to the problem of the madman from Iraq, who you may have noticed is standing in the middle of the range.
You can tell the time frame of Saddam's invasion into Kuwait.
It's so cool.
This includes our demonstration of the Heckler
America.
& Koch
Oh, yeah.
G11 K2 rifle. Jim and Volker will be available at the conclusion of today's firing to show you the rifles, answer any questions, and hand out literature and promotional items.
that's a big
Thank you for your
group.
interest
That
in
is
the
a big
pump
group of
products of
people.
Heckler & Co.
And I mean, as far as a product demonstration goes on, I mean, look at all
That was
that
a
they put
very
into that.
impressive
Yeah.
demonstration.
I mean, it was obviously very scripted in what they wanted to do, but they covered all of the things you
Yeah.
wanted. Anybody in the crowd were like, yeah, but that would never work if it was, in the desert in
water.
Iraq, it would be all dirty. Or we couldn't give those to Marines because, they're going to be coming out of the ocean and into the sand. And you get to see that they're able
Excuse
to,
me. Sorry.
call out all those things and show its capability. But I think what we all can really see, even though it's not the best video quality and we're standing from behind, was just how controllable and accurate it was. If you saw the white HK logo target they was shooting, there was one
Tiny
big
hole.
hole
Yeah.
in there. He wasn't just randomly dumping rounds onto a large garage door sized
And
target.
again, I mean, that's 3 rounds at a time. And to a knowledgeable gun guy, you're going, something sounds a little off there. Like, I clearly can't hear multiple rounds, but it also sounds different than 1 round.
Yeah. Sure.
You're like, that's 3 rounds.
Sure.
Crazy.
45 rounds and what's that? 15 trigger pulls.
Yeah, and standing offhand, and you didn't see him rocking and
No.
rolling like this guy with a UMP
With the
45.
UMP, yeah.
It was pretty awesome.
Well, we can ignore that and go ahead and move on. Okay, so with such a sort of mind-blowing thing here, obviously we're not using this. This is not a thing. So what happened?
The Berlin Wall fell down.
Dang it.
And the great Soviet
No,
threat.
that's a good thing.
God, good for you.
Yeah.
Good job, everyone.
Yep, that great Soviet threat that had been there, and that all of the NATO forces had been building up and arming against the whole Cold War. That threat was gone.
That's a good thing.
It is
It's a good thing, Jay.
It is a good
My bad.
We didn't get this out of it, but it's an overall.
Yeah, but I wanted it.
So at that time, for the German government, they were far more concerned, obviously politically, but also economically and militarily, concerned with reunifying their country.
Yeah.
They now were going to have far fewer, people within the armed forces that they needed to arm, and they needed to put that money and effort towards the reunification. So that program that H&K had spent so much time and effort and their own money as well in leaning into got canceled. And that also led the U.S. Army to lose funding for their own ACR program, and so that fell away as well. So really what happened wasn't the fact that this wasn't a capable weapon. It just lost the support it needed to become viable. And at that point, H&K as a company was able to then just say, okay, then if we're not going to do caseless ammunition, futuristic weapon, then we'll just build the best 5.56 weapons out there we can, and that's where we see them turn to the G36 and later the HK 416, and,
Yep.
and now the newer models. So
I mean, those are cool too, but,
yeah,
yeah.
Damn wall.
yeah,
Freaking wall, man.
Yeah.
All over a wall. All over a wall. It's just craziness. In thinking about this thing coming in, here's the analogy that I came up with. So you take an iPhone, right? And at the user level, an iPhone is an incredibly simple tool.
Yeah.
Right? There's no buttons. There's no nothing. Like, I mean, dummy can figure out how to use an iPhone pretty easily, right?
Kids do, so same.
Right. And they're like,
Idiots.
a bunch of dummies. But if you were to go internally into what makes an iPhone work, you go, it's the most complicated thing on planet Earth. But you go, at the user level, it's incredibly simple.
yeah,
That's the G11.
sure.
Like, it's the most complicated thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, we're just looking like my watch has an exposed case back. We're just looking at the movement, and you're just going, I mean, it's kind of comical how similar this
Rotors and
mechanical
springs
wristwatch
and
and a G11 are. And yet, when you look at the operation of these things, you're like, I feel like I could figure this out pretty quick, Like, it's not really that complex.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the testament to the troop feedback from the ACR was that it's not like they gave these guys experience on it beforehand, but they were able to pick this thing up and have incredible effects on target with a weapon that obviously is incredibly complex internally.
Well, it's Yeah, it's sad the thing never came to be because it's just so fascinating and cool, and I really want one on my gun room wall.
Well, let's clear that up real quick too. It did come to be. The German government got delivery of guns, so did the U.S. It's just exterior circumstances made it so it didn't progress.
Yeah.
Or get widely adopted.
Sure.
And I think of it, you talk about bucket list items, and there's plenty of them in this room itself, but the bucket list experience of getting to shoot one of these.
Oh my God.
I mean, through the roof, because again, even with watching that video, we could all kind of visualize what it's going to be like, but we have no idea what that experience is going to be. So one day, I hope we get there.
I've heard rumors of ammo.
Season 4, maybe?
Season 4.
Well, we've heard rumors of ammo.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. If the legend is real, then they can reach on one out.
hey, super cool.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I mean, it's just a fascinating gun. We wanted to try to bring you guys something that, we try to bring you videos on guns. Obviously, you can go out and buy as we can, but we try to bring you videos here and there and stuff where it's like, hey, look, man, this is just about showing you cool historical things that exist. It doesn't matter if you can get it. Sometimes cool things just need to be talked about,
Yeah. And there's really not many videos on this. So especially this in depth to this extent. So thank you, James.
Yeah. Pleasure as always.
Cool. Well, you guys jump in the comments. Appreciate you watching. Catch you next week.